He had one of those sort of inspirational moments in a meeting, and he was like, "This is one of the most iconic surf spots on the globe. It's 3 miles from our office, and if we're not going to stand up and fight against this project, we should just quit our jobs, lock the door, and leave."
From WSL Pure, this is One Ocean. Hey everyone, Reese here, coming to you from a safe distance. I sincerely hope that you and yours are safe and healthy amidst this global pandemic. I have to admit, it's pretty wild. The numbers, at least here in the US, aren't getting much better, and many of us are a few weeks into self-quarantine already. And the trails and the beaches are closed, and it looks like we've got another month of this ahead of us. That said, we are really fortunate. Currently, our team is all healthy, and we're still able to continue our work, bringing you a fresh episode this week with some dear friends who happen to be experts on the long-standing campaign to save Trestles. And whether you've scored great waves at lowers or you've never even heard of the spot, there's a lot to learn in this episode. In particular, the incredible courage of the grassroots organizations who took on this campaign in the face of big money, big government, and what looked like an unwinnable fight. Thanks to Surfrider Foundation's CEO, Dr. Chad Nelsen, and their coastal preservation manager, Stefanie Sekich-Quinn, for joining us this week. We caught up over Zoom, and it was a really fun conversation. We learned a lot, and I hope you do too. Without further ado, here's Chad and Stefanie. Chad, Stefanie, thank you so much for being here. Quickly, for those who don't know you, let's introduce yourselves. Stefanie, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Stefanie Sekich-Quinn, and I am the Coastal Preservation Manager for the headquarters of Surfrider.
Awesome. And Chad?
And my name is Chad Nelsen, and I'm the CEO of the Surfrider Foundation.
And normally we would all be in person hanging out, hopefully pre or post surf with big hugs and whatnot. But in light of all that's going on in the world and global pandemics, we're doing this via Zoom, as many other people are. So it's nice to at least be able to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's our new world, I guess.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned before we started, we are sharing some Trestles content this week at the WSL. And as soon as I heard that we were going to be sharing some Trestles content and kind of rewinding back to those events, I thought, who knows the story of Trestles better than anyone else but my friends over at Surfrider. And I thought maybe you guys could share why this place is so special, and what's been going on there for a long time, which, I think many of us in the surf industry or surf space will be familiar with, but I'd love to get into the backstory and all the work that you've done. But first, maybe let's define and introduce Surfrider to anyone who isn't familiar with Surfrider Foundation.
Sure, I can take that one. And then maybe, Steph, you can talk about why Trestles is such an amazing place. The Surfrider Foundation is a grassroots coastal conservation organization. We've been around for 35 years. We're in almost 200. We have almost 200 chapters and clubs around the U.S. and in almost every country. We have affiliates in Europe, Australia, Japan, and Argentina. And we really focus on clean water and healthy beaches.
Yeah. And I think there's so many reasons why Trestles is important. It is housed in San Onofre State Beach, which is the 5th most visited state park in California. And it's home to 12 threatened endangered species. Obviously, it's one of the best surf breaks in the world, arguably, to some people. It houses campsites that people, can really tuck themselves away from local communities. And then there's a lot of cultural resources that are connected to the Native Americans that have lived there for millennia. So it houses everything from small critters to recreationalists to really important sacred sites.
And I would add, it's one of the last sort of healthy, intact watersheds in Southern California. So, it's one of the only places where you can actually surf after a rain in Southern California and the water will be clean.
Oh, and is that why it's been so crowded during the COVID-19 shutdowns? No one's afraid to go to Trestles?
Probably.
I think, amazingly enough, it was one of the last places to close. And in fact, they closed the parking lots yesterday, which is certainly, you've seen the sort of visitorship decline a little bit, but it hasn't been great social distancing out there.
Well, finally, LA County just closed the beaches here. Closed the beaches, not just the lots, but the actual beaches. So it's just kind of our new reality that we're all dealing with. But, you know, I can understand and relate with why Trestles is so special. I mean, Chad, when I first moved out here from the East Coast, it's one of the first things I got to do was come down and spend a day with you. And you took me to Upper Trestles to surf. And, you know, even on a kind of modest surf day, that wave was still so fun and so special. And just the walk down there, it's just a really incredible detachment from the rest of Orange County, which can be, you know, pretty commercialized. There's a lot going on, and it's just this kind of little oasis.
Yeah, no, it really is. I mean, you do feel like you've left sort of the urban like madness. It's beautiful. There's, you know, still a river mouth there, and then there's these complex of surf spots. You've got Cottons, Uppers, Lowers, Middles, Church, all the way down to San Onofre. So it's pretty rich with pretty amazing surf spots, and probably the most heavily used like mile of coast for surfers in the state of California.
Yeah, so understandably really important in addition to all the, you know, to surfers, but in addition to all the reasons you highlighted. So for those who don't know the backstory, take us back, start us on this journey of the campaign to save Trestles. Where does it all begin, and where are we now? And I'm going to jump in with questions, but I mean, this is almost as much for me to learn as it is to educate some of our friends around the world.
Hey, Steph, why don't you start with the basics, and I'll kind of tell a little bit about Surfrider, how we jumped into it.
Sure. Sounds good. Well, a lot of us like to joke at Surfrider that this started back when we were adolescents. Like 15 years ago, you know, after like our 16th birthday. So for me, I've been working on it really, honestly, my entire adult life. So yeah, essentially, an agency called the Toll Road Corridor Agency. Actually, it's the Transportation Corridor Agency. Excuse me. I've been saying it for so long. Proposed to build a 6-lane, 16-mile toll road that would have bisected San Onofre State Beach. It literally would have gone straight through the middle of the park. They proposed this over, honestly, 20 years ago at this point. There was different iterations of it. There was different levels of activism that came to fruition because of this devastating plan. But as we were talking about at the beginning of this podcast, it sent the irie around the world. Once people realized this park was going to be in danger, we almost couldn't keep up with the activism. And Chad can kind of jump in and I can kind of finish up with how many people got involved. But at the time, obviously, the world tour was taking place at Trestles. And so it always had eyes on it all of the time. And that was really a great benefit that we had from the surfing community. But it wasn't just the surfing community and the locals. As I said, people from around the world came to defend this surf break. We had tens of thousands of letters that were sent to all of the decision makers that had their fingers in this pie. We were able to beat back the road over the course of 15 years through the regulatory process and through the legal process. We've had more successful dates in court than I think most dating shows have ever had in their lifetime. We've had more successful hearings where we broke records for the crazy amount of people showing up to kind of activate and participate in their civic duty. So I'll kind of kick it over to Chad to just give you this kind of breadth of it. And obviously the impacts would have been devastating because not just for an environmental, but cultural and recreational components of it.
Yeah, I think that's right, Steph. And it's funny now looking back since we won, that all that was able to happen. But in the early days, you know, this road was on the map already. Governor Schwarzenegger at the time supported it.
You said it was on the map already? There were serious
conversations.
Like people,
it was literally it was like a dot. It was like a dotted line on the map. Like this is coming. Like if you bought this is you know in the old days when we had paper maps. And
listen, kids, back in the day,
that's how
three of us used to drive around with paper maps in our cars.
We had cartographers.
That's how long we've been fighting this thing. But you know, so it was on the map, and there were serious discussions inside Surfrider's office that this was an unwinnable campaign, and it was, you know, not worth fighting because it was a losing cause. And to the credit
take me to those moments, like what got you over the hump of saying let's go for this? Because as a nonprofit, you have to be really selective with where you put your resources and what fights you fight. And I think that, you know, strategy is really important. And so, you know, What got you over that hump? What made you say, you know what, is it this one is too important, or we think there's a chance, or we want to fight it no matter what because maybe we can at least steer them in the right direction and get some concessions? What was driving that decision making?
No, I think that's a good question. I mean, this is I don't know the exact number Steph could tell you, but, hundreds of millions of dollars project, part of a larger network. So there was a lot of things working against us. And, the turning point, really, the credit goes to a guy named Matt McLean, former marketing director at Surfrider. He had one of those sort of inspirational moments in a meeting, and he was like, "Hey, we're the Surfrider Foundation. This is one of the most iconic surf spots on the globe. It's 3 miles from our office, and if we're not going to stand up and fight against this project, we should just quit our jobs, lock the door, and leave." I mean, and I think he was right. He was like, we at least should go down fighting. And I think everybody looked at him and said, "You're absolutely right." But
I got chills just listening to you recount that moment, man.
It was really good, and and he was right about that, and it really was a turning point. And so from that point on, we're like, all right, we're gonna fight this thing. We had other nonprofit coalition members that were hugely important to us also questioning it, and I think when we sort of jumped in and had that resolve, it was the beginning of turning the corner and building momentum.
Yeah.
Was Surfrider the first group to jump in?
Kind of. I mean, there were the California
It's hard
State
to
Parks.
ever say who's first, but I mean,
It is.
sometimes there's kind of a leading organization of a coalition. So I'm curious, who were those first groups, or who are you working with?
It was really the California State Parks Foundation. They, to this day, still get the kind of queen crown to wear for carrying the torch. They kept us together as a coalition. As Chad said, once we coalesced together as a coalition with 12 nonprofits at the national level and then very local level, we had a lot of impetus behind us. But to Chad's point, we legitimately thought we were going to lose even up to the Coastal Commission hearing. But here's the catch. We had spent years and over $1 million, just us scraping together funds, trying to cobble together everything we could, working, honestly, I worked 70 hours a week sometimes. But then we got to the Coastal Commission hearing and roughly 4,000 people showed up, and that scared the bejesus out of the coastal commissioners. We had counted all of their votes going into this hearing.
I want to make sure people hear that. This is always what happens when we get together. So this is the same thing when we did the panel at the US Open. You just roll out some heavy stat, and I'm like, hang on. Let's all pause and take that
4,000 people.
4,000 people show up to a committee hearing. And
Yes.
You can even roll over that. What time of day was it? What day of the week was it? Because these hearings are usually a pain in the ass to get to. You've got a job, you've got kids, you've got whatever else going on. To get people to come out and show up and say, I'm here because I care this much about it that I'm going to interrupt my entire day. Yes. 4,000 people. That's incredible.
Yes, Reese. And actually, when you say it like that, kind of make me want to tear up again and give me the chills because, again, we did not expect to have that many people. I kind of started getting this inkling that we were going to have over 1,000 people in my head when I woke up. I was like, we're totally going to get 1,000 people. So we called the Coastal Commission and said, we're kind of nervous that a lot of people are going to come to this. We need a bigger venue. So they switched it to actually a Wednesday. So we called it Big Wednesday, of course. And it was supposed to be a few hours. Chad, what was it? 12 hours we were there?
I think even longer because I think they made the decision at 11 at night. So yeah, at least 12 hours.
Yeah.
4,000 people there for 12 hours.
4,000 people there for 12 hours. And like I said, and I'll hand it back to you guys, but we counted all of the votes with the commission, and we had spent months meeting with the commissioners one-on-one and pretty much had calculated that we were going to lose for kind of maybe like an 8 to 10 to 12 vote, to give you an idea. So there's 12 commissioners, and we thought we kind of really only had 3 or 4 solid votes. And then, like I said, when you have decision makers that see thousands of people before them, it scares the bejesus out of them. It goes, I have to do the right thing because I have thousands of people who are hanging on my every word, and this action will be memorialized forever if we take the wrong decision.
And so what that tells me is it's the importance of getting people to show up and use their voice. I mean, it's really about, like, you do have power when you show up in numbers, and people have to stand face to face with their constituents.
it is the like best example maybe that we've ever had. I mean, it's funny. I also I call it the like Woodstock of surfing conservation. There were people there in costumes. We had kids. There were posters, surfboards, bands playing. The surf industry rallied like nothing I've ever seen, and they showed up with their buses. And I don't think Sprinter vans were around yet, but the equivalent. And it was almost celebratory in the sense that like the surfing community really came together. So there was a lot of high fives and people seeing each other. There were people from the Bay Area that drove down, people from
Australia,
Oregon, Washington,
Japan, different countries came, not just for the hearing, but once they found out it was happening, they came.
So that part of it, and it just shows it is the quintessential example of the power of people, and it works over and over again, as this campaign showed and others have. When you get those numbers, I mean, quick aside, this is what happened in, I think, a lot of credit to the Fight the Bite folks in Australia, which I know you've talked about again. That was just a people-powered movement. It's so cool to see. So, yeah, I mean, that was really what it was about.
And this campaign also went on for years. Yeah. I mean, this was a multiple years battle. And I think one of the impressive things is, okay, so you got 4,000 people to show up to this hearing, but you had to have had other hearings. You had to have had other, times when you need people to show up. And so there's strength in numbers, but then there's also endurance. And I think that's a big part of all of this. And so how do you keep people engaged and up to speed? So what are some of the strategies and tactics there that you use to keep everyone together and keep everyone marching? Because I think, in my experience, and I go back to the Surfrider chapter in New York City, we've fought pipelines there off of New York City, and they may lose one, and then everyone goes on and goes back to fighting plastic pollution or whatever it is, and then another pipeline thing pops up again, because the industry is like, oh, we'll just wait them out, and they'll forget, and they'll get busy, or there'll be a global pandemic, and they'll get busy, and then we'll try and slide it through, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even just today, the EPA is rolling back regulations while we're all kind of focused on other stuff. And so, how do you keep people going and keep that momentum up and keep everyone going? It's an endurance question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead, Steph, and I'll jump in.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to make a super quick point is we did the original organizing. Twitter and Facebook and Insta weren't even really around. So
because what year was that?
So we kind of started the heavy organizing around 2005 to 2008. So 2008 is when Twitter started.
MySpace.
Yeah. Yes. We actually launched, I believe, Chad, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe our Twitter account for the hearing.
Yeah.
So it was kind of the same kind of time frame. So to your point about how did we do this through endurance, after we won those big wins, of course, the toll road developers wanted to build it in segments. So we had another 5 years of fighting it. And fortunately, we had the help of social media. At that time, we really needed to rely on it to kind of keep it going. So we had lots of PSAs and videos. And again, the surf industry was super helpful. There's a lot of little videos and things that were made that were put out there to kind of keep the intrigue and beat going. But I mean, it really came down to our chapters continually being involved and our coalition, hands down, the Save San Onofre Coalition. To this day, we still meet on a weekly basis. And the fight's not over because there are probably some, other agencies in Orange County that would like to see like an arterial road or just like a small road go through the park. We have protections that ban the actual toll road. And so we're continuing to work on legislation right now that would ban any road. Even if some like you, Reese, wanted to take a shovel and start making a tiny road, this legislation would be like, no, you can't. So we're still having that endurance.
I have been thinking about that.
I mean, because you need to get up. The COVID's getting you crazy.
And one of the things I would add to that is, Peter Douglas, who is one of the the late, great Peter Douglas, one of the legends and architects of the California Coastal Commission, arguably the most protective piece of coastal legislation in the world. He famously said, the coast is never saved, it's always being saved. And to Steph's point, this was a learning for me. I thought a state park was sacrosanct, right? You make a state park or a national park or local park, and it's a park, right? It's there forever. And this was for me, 15, 20 years ago, this eye-opening thing. What, they're going to put a road through a state park? And, as we urbanize, the open spaces become the last place to build things. And so we're going to be protecting our parks and our coastal parks and forever. Local stewardship is the only way those things are going to remain.
For sure. And so with that local stewardship, and Stefanie, you mentioned this, you have the coalition. What other orgs are a part of that coalition? I imagine it's maybe some of your other chapters or usual suspects in the surf world, but who else is a part of that?
Yeah, so I like to say we're like a circus. We have the big tent and we have the big 10 organizations that are involved, right? So we have Sierra Club and the Natural Resource Defense Council, the Audubon Society. Those are like the big 10, and even Surfrider is considered under the big 10, although, we're not as large as them because we have national presence. And then we have kind of the statewide focus group. So it'd be like California Trout Unlimited, right? And then you get down all the way to, this is my favorite example, it's called the Laguna Bluebelt Coalition. So it's just a bunch of women, honestly, in Laguna that have been protecting green space and coastal areas, and they joined in. But, and then of course, Wild Coast, which, is a big environmental surf NGO as well. But some people would kind of come in and out, and there was always about 5 of us that kind of kept the drumbeat going. And like I said, virtually meet all of the time and keep it going, because like Chad said, we will have to forever protect this park.
Yeah.
I would like, go ahead.
Chad.
I was going to say, I think 2 of the things that were really made this campaign super successful, Steph mentioned one of them, the California State Parks Foundation, which, by the way, is this amazing organization. It's a nonprofit that supports California state parks, which we all love. I didn't even know they existed before this campaign. They're an amazing organization. And this woman, Elizabeth Goldstein, she was the conductor of the campaign and ran this thing and just did a brilliant job. So having that strong leader in a coalition is fundamental to the success of a coalition. And the other thing was, all those groups Steph mentioned, everybody kind of picked a lane. So the Endangered Habitats League focused on endangered species and habitat. The Sierra Club really focused on like general park visitors. Surfrider obviously focused on surfing in the surf community. NRDC really focused on the like legal land use issues and the lawsuits. And so each group kind of had a very specific role, and that the park has something for everyone. The Native American tribes talked about those important cultural resources and brought their community. So we kind of had, Wild Coast brought in sort of the Latino community. So we had like every group representing sort of their sector and coming together. And I think that was part of the power.
Yeah, so you have this broad coalition, yet everyone has their sort of special interest in lane within that, which it sounds like is a winning strategy, right? Because I could see a world in which, and I've seen this in other, examples on the East Coast where I'm from, where, Cape Wind is always brought up, right? A offshore wind energy farm, and the different groups that aligned in different ways to, knock that project back. So I could see a world in which somebody said like, oh, what? A bunch of surfers want to protect their wave or something? That's a first world special interest, whatever. But it was actually, there's so much more there, and you brought in all those different voices. So I think that's super important. Was that also really challenging? Well, I mean, I imagine there must have been some places where you guys were kind of going, hang on a second, no, we need to fight this way or that way. And how did you manage that? Was it all underneath the leadership of
Elizabeth?
Yeah.
There, honestly, don't laugh at me, Reese. You know me well enough where, I could be a little cliche. Honestly, it was very smooth sailing. I think it got a little more complicated when we had to kind of get all of our lawsuits together. But the actual agreeing on strategy, because lawsuits are super complicated and they're expensive and they're time consuming. So outside of those really technical fields where you're kind of debating these really kind of large things, honest to God, and knock on wood, I hope I continue to have coalitions like this in the future, because I swear it was very, very seamless for the most part. And I think it's because what Chad said, we stayed in our lanes. We respect each other's lanes. And then we had that conductor who made us all sing in unison when we needed to. But I've been doing this work for 25 years and I've never participated in a coalition like this. And I honestly don't know if I ever will again, because it was like, this magic in a bottle that came together. I also think it was the time of the year. It was 2008 was a very different phase for people. The world was kind of changing at that time. We had, our elections were inspiring. We had just had Obama. Things were kind of changing. So I think that also that magic sauce was kind of trapped in our bottle. So it was a great coalition.
I like it. To go back to, you've both touched on this a little bit. This campaign took a long time. It took a lot of time. Stefanie, you're working on it for 20 years or whatever. That takes money. That takes funding. And you're a nonprofit organization. And, it's, Chad, was that an enabler for you? Well, I guess you weren't CEO then, but putting your CEO hat on and being in that position or just being a part of the organization and thinking about fundraising, was it like, hey, we've got this campaign, we need to continue to fundraise for it? Or I could also imagine a world in which donors are saying like, you're still fighting this thing, or like, why are you guys, are you not going to win it? This seems like you shouldn't be spending your dollars there. And also just for the people who don't understand, like those dollars pay salaries so people can go show up to these meetings and these hearings and be a part of fighting this thing. And so I guess I kind of want to get into the funding side of it. Not that you need to share numbers, but
sure,
thinking about that with your sort of, because I think your average person is like, I make a donation to Surfrider and maybe doesn't think about where those dollars go or how they get spent.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting that over, the 15 years or more that we had staff working on this thing, I mean, there were dozens of people putting in thousands of hours, and we definitely invested millions of dollars over that time to win this campaign, which is frankly what it takes. We were fighting organization that had hundreds of millions of dollars to spend. Their ad budget was bigger than our campaign budget by a long shot, maybe 10x.
I was going to say tenfold.
Yeah. And so, there were a couple of key foundations that had, that jumped into this thing and rallied a few others. A previous section of this toll road had bisected some amazing habitat right behind my house in Laguna Beach, the 73. It's part of their network. And that was a loss for the environmental community. And so that was, I think, motivating some of the organizations and the funders. But those funders were essential. Not only did they sort of seed the campaign, they brought other funders in. It's one thing for me to ask for money. It's another thing for the funders to reach out to their peers. And to their credit, we're still receiving funding today to sort of, as try to mop this thing up. And actually kill it and finalize it. And so those handful of private family foundations that cared about this part of the world and surfing and habitats and state parks were what made this happen. And it does take real money, and frankly, at the end of the day, when we settled some of the lawsuits, we went back and like tallied all of our hours and received some money. As sort of mitigation or settlement. Most of that went to the lawyers that fought this campaign for the last 15 years. And at the end of the day, great win, great for morale, great for surfing. I don't think it was really, and great for our reputation as an organization, but it wasn't a money winner. I mean, I think
we lost money theoretically.
Yeah, we did, and that's money well spent.
Right.
But it's not like we, came out of this thing flush. You
are a nonprofit, so
we did lose a little money.
No, I say that because there's always these accusations. Oh, you're just fighting this campaign because it's going to be, it's like the world thinks the climate scientists or skeptics think the climate scientists are talking about climate change to make money, which they've never visited a climate scientist's home before. But so, it took us real money. There were foundations that supported it that were very loyal.
You mentioned kind of mopping it up. So where is it today? Where do we stand today? And what do we have to look forward to? Because I'm thinking about this as a place that, is so important. We get fans every day who tell the WSL that we should put it back on the tour schedule.
You should.
That's not my call. We're going to have to call up Pat.
We're going to lobby.
We're going to have to call up Patchy and G and all those guys. And I'll tell Elo and, he'll be like, yeah, get in line. We've got enough to worry about right now with COVID-19 affecting the tour. So, but people love that wave, and a lot of our pros love that wave, and they live down there so they can surf that wave. And so it is important. So where do we stand today, and what do we have to look forward to, and what can people do if they want to, continue to help protect it?
Yeah. So I think that's a great question. And we all need a little silver lining right now in the love and time that we're in right now. So the good news is that, like I said, we've been fighting it for 15 years. We've won every court case that we can have. We've won every regulatory turn we can have. And now we're at the stage where we're working on state legislation. So in the next couple weeks, we're going to be launching an action alert that will go to Californians only, that are essentially asking their state representatives to codify the protections that we have received in court. So it's a really simple way to kind of say that we won all these cases and now let's codify it in state law. So as I was joking before, it would literally ban anyone or any agency from wanting to build a road through the park. You can tell I said it for 15 years. So right now our protections ban a toll road from the park. That's codified in law through our court cases. And now we just want to kind of put the bow on it and send it through the legislature, have Governor Newsom sign it so that we can once and for all say that this park is protected literally from the legislature, the courts, and through regulatory measures.
Mop it up.
Mop it up.
Well, I think it's also these kind of complex cases do take this much time, and so, it was, some people showed up for 3 days at the hearing and thanked them for that. But, there was, as you've said, decades before that and a decade after that. And that's just also a good reminder that these campaigns are never sort of easy or one and done.
Yeah, for sure. And so what can people do to, learn more or be a part of, this movement?
Right. So right now we have, if you go to savetrestles.org, this is like a trusty old website that has been clunking along. Oh my gosh, Chad, how many times have we written blogs for this website over the past 15 years? So you can go back and get some historical reading done in your boring times. But again, we're going to be launching an action alert in the next couple weeks. Things got a little bit slowed down because of coronavirus. But yeah, if you live in California, head over to savetrestles.org, sign that action alert that will go to your state representatives. Once it passes the legislature, we're really going to need an uptick of people to pressure the governor to actually sign it into law. And once we have it signed into law, then we're going to throw another huge party and we're all going to go surfing. And then we're going to really say that we did this as a community because, again, it's cliche, but we did this as a community and we're going to have to keep protecting this. So there is silver lining. Look for legislation. And honestly, thanks for all of your support because I know people who are watching this they still keep in touch with me from the surf world. It's amazing. In fact, I have one kid that was 18. He's now 18, reached out to me recently and is going to be writing a paper for it in college. And he came to the first hearing when he was 8. So it's, it's a generational so cool. thing.
I love that. I love those stories. I love hearing that from different nonprofits who have, started on a campaign and then 10 years later that kid comes back and is a part of that campaign. Or I was talking to Kukua Hawaii recently. They were talking about how they now have kids who are coming back and, volunteering or interning with them. And, Natalie McKinney over there, she's like, that's what we got to do. Get the youth engaged and then get them to come back and run for city council and, be a part of the movement. Anything else you two want to share about this? I really appreciate you taking some time to give us the backstory, but anything else you want to touch on?
No, I would add that, I think the Trestles story is the story of every single surf spot in the world. If there's not a community that cares about the place, that's willing to get active and protect it, they're all going to be threatened at some point or another for some reason. And so, all the more reason to get involved with Surfrider if it's here or a local conservation group in your community, wherever it is across the globe.
Awesome. Well said. Well, thank you both. Chad, thanks so much. It's good to see your face. And Stefanie, good to see you. I look forward to sometime soon when we can get together and surf and hug and high five and all sorts of that. But for now, I'll just kind of Zoom goodbye.
Thank you, Reese. Goodbye.
Thanks, Reese.
Thanks, Stefanie and Chad, for a really fun chat, and more importantly, for all the work that you and your team and the incredible coalition of partners have done to save Trestles. The line that really stuck with me this week is Chad's quote of Peter Douglas: "The coast is never saved, it's always being saved." That seems truer now more than ever. If you like this episode, share it with a friend, throw us a rating, 5 stars please, or write a review. It really helps the podcast grow and find new listeners. And since everyone's quarantined, I know you're not driving on your commute right now, so you have no excuses not to throw a review. I'm kidding, sort of. If you want to see what Trestles looks like when the waves are pumping and the world's best are on it, be sure to check out WSL Rewind and the WSL Vault this week at worldsurfleague.com. And that's all I got. Until next time, stay safe, wash your hands, keep social distance, and we'll talk soon.
Do you like that? Well, if so, subscribe over there and then watch more videos over there. And then tell us your favorite videos down there. It's a 3-step process. Do them all now.